If you've been on the internet for any amount of time, you've probably seen a political comic by Ben Garrison. Even if you have never heard his name before, over the past decade, his right-wing culture war cartoons with captions representing each and everything on them have been memed to death across the World Wide Web. While the general public doesn't know much about the artist beyond this, upon doing some digging, I stumbled upon the intriguing story of a baby boomer with a 50-year career in political cartooning. More interesting is that his deep understanding of online culture was developed after a 5-year battle with 4chan trolls that forced him to learn their world and lingo in an attempt at fighting back in the early 2010s. Pair that with the work ethic and skill set of previous employment in print media allowed his combination of old and new to flourish in the modern era. So today I'd like to dig into the bizarre untold tale of how Ben developed his distinct style, fought with a group of trolls for half a decade, and came out the other end as one of the internet's most famous web cartoonists. Benjamin R. Garrison was born in 1957 at a military hospital in Virginia. He was named after his father, who served in the US Navy. The family relocated frequently until he turned 11, settling in Bremerton, Washington. This is where Ben would grow up with his 4 siblings. The young boy took drawing seriously early on, filling notebooks with doodles and sketches. While he tried to be humorous, he later admitted he, quote, didn't know what was funny, and never developed a sense of humor. Still, these cartoons and his ability to draw caricatures made him popular among his peers. Because Ben Sr.'s hometown was in Texas, his family often visited the Lone Star State. They usually went to cheer on the newly established Dallas Cowboys. Walt Garrison, one of his favorite players, happened to be a distant relative. When his dad retired in 1972, they relocated to San Angelo, Texas. Ben graduated from high school 3 years later, having grown to 6'3". This didn't translate to any athletic ability, though. Instead, Garrison had creative aspirations. In 1975, he enrolled at Angel State University, pursuing a degree in the arts. He moved into a garage apartment alone at the age of 18. As he put it, I worked in a bakery and made donuts, so I had enough to get by. That was my plan, to live simply and be a starving artist. Though he didn't have much of a social life, he swiftly made a name for himself among the local art scene. Ben started entering his oil paintings to a prestigious art show in Midland, Texas, winning first-place prizes 2 years in a row. Another contest to design a lottery scratch ticket netted him $5,000. But the artist wouldn't get his first proper gig until his senior year at ASU. Ben began working for the San Angelo Standard-Times, getting hired as a part-time cartoonist in 1978. This would end up being his first foray into the world of political cartoons. His very first was a comic critical of the national draft. Other drawings featuring the paper's rooster mascot were in response to the then unfolding Iranian Revolution. Several of these were included in a college textbook named Practicing Texas Politics. Ben's work elevated the Standard-Times, who published an article praising him for enhancing their nameplate. He would stay with the paper over the next 5 years, winning numerous awards. In 1983, another article was written about Ben, this time announcing his marriage to Tina Norton. Tina was a fellow illustrator hired to work in their advertising department. The two quickly hit it off, going on fishing trips and camping near the summit of Mount Guadalupe. The couple wedded in Ohio, Tina's home state, although they ultimately settled down in San Angelo. A year later, Ben left the Standard-Times to work for another paper. One day I received an offer from the San Antonio Express-News. I wanted to accept it because my salary would more than double, but I didn't want to leave the Standard-Times. The managing editor offered to nearly match their salary. I asked him why he didn't offer this to me before, and he said, "You didn't ask." That was a good lesson about asking. I accepted the Express-News offer. Now, it must be understood that Ben was mostly brought on here to help create information graphics rather than editorial cartoons. He recalled several conversations with older cartoonists, who were quite critical of his work. When talking about one of his coworkers, he would say, "Bob wasn't impressed with my cartoons. He thought they were too liberal." In addition to that, he told me bluntly that I needed to develop a sense of humor, that my cartoons were not funny. While in San Antonio, I met another editorial cartoonist. He said I didn't look mean enough to be an editorial cartoonist, and I suspected he was correct. I still hadn't worked out my political convictions, and I, frankly, did not enjoy skewering politicians in the cartoons. Sometimes I felt sorry for them. Being mean didn't appeal to me, and I had less time to draw cartoons anyway. I lost confidence and decided to stop drawing them altogether. He only worked at this publication for a year, as the couple would end up moving to Seattle in 1984. There, Ben landed a gig at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. He became their chief artist, directing a 5-person art department. Ben was grateful for the opportunity, and worked hard enough in his first year to receive the Best Special Effort Award. There he produced everything except editorial cartoons, even dabbling in photography. Though he left this formal position in 1987, he continued working with the PI as a freelancer over the next 2 decades. Ben's life would change forever in 1999 when the couple welcomed their son into the world. I had some trouble adjusting to the fact I was a father. As much as I loved my son, I wanted to escape. My new status as a parent dredged up some unresolved issues I had with my own dad, old emotions that I didn't want to deal with, and it resulted in a great deal of internal conflict. Nevertheless, I was determined to be a better father than my own. When he left the Seattle PI, it was to take a leap of faith, hoping to make it as a self-employed freelance contractor. Thankfully, those 17 years spent at newspapers gave him a keen appreciation for deadlines. By 1997, he found enough work to earn himself a steady income. Up until this point, these gigs were all done locally. But with the turn of the century, the internet was becoming much more accessible to the general public. Ben was quick to jump on this in hopes of finding new clients, creating his first GeoCities page in 2003. The earliest intact capture of BenGarrison.com is from 2006, although archives are missing its Flash elements. That December, he created the blog Garrison Graphics. One piece that did survive was a poster he made for the conservation effort of an endangered fish species. It's expansive and quite detailed, showing his versatility outside the comic style he's known for. At this point, it's worth clarifying that although Ben started his career doing political cartoons, it was only a brief phase. He preferred to study fine art, with a good example being his Western Cubist paintings inspired by Pablo Picasso, his favorite artist. Things would change in light of the 2008 financial crisis. That year, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer closed, switching to an online-only format. Garrison and his wife then moved to Big Fork, Montana, a largely unincorporated community with a population less than 5,000. It was here, after a 20-year hiatus, Ben would finally return to the realm of politics, angered by the Bush and Obama administration's banker bailouts, aligning with the so-called Tea Party movement instead. The result was Audit the Fed, published on August 6, 2009. Already, we can see his style didn't change much over the years, with his habit of labeling everything having been there from the start. To be fair, while he's mocked for this trope, it is a pretty standard practice for the old-timey cartoons Ben grew up with. He started putting out comics regularly, clearly having a lot to say about the many targets of his satire. Ben had a deep distrust of the media and the government. He would allude to subjects like the Bilderbergs and Illuminati. The artist was still figuring out his own beliefs. Over time, Garrison came to identify as a libertarian. He became a supporter of the then presidential candidate Ron Paul, whose campaign gained popularity on the internet. Paul argued America's Federal Reserve needed to be reformed or removed. Ben cared about this issue deeply, pointing out the enormous debt burden the US government was putting onto its people. It inspired one of his most famous early strips, The March of Tyranny. This was published in August of 2010. The cartoon depicts global elite bankers as the eyes of Providence, trampling the public with its legs. The legs correspond to the Democrat and Republican parties, who both follow orders from the mainstream media. Drawn with a Sharpie in 3 hours, it has been translated into multiple languages and seen by millions. He first shared the illustrations on libertarian message boards, rapidly going viral across the web. Unfortunately, this unprecedented amount of exposure would also introduce him to the underbelly of the internet, specifically 4chan's politically incorrect board, also known as Poll. What needs to be pointed out is that Garrison's themes of anti-authoritarianism and stance against the global elites resonated with the anonymous denizens. However, they interpreted those at the top as being Jewish, and began creating edits of Ben's work to reflect this. His cartoons were combined with the works of A. Wyatt Mann, real name Nick Bougas, who is perhaps the most well-known and influential racist cartoonist of all time. The white nationalists first gained prominence in the late 1980s after propaganda for the white Aryan resistance. His most infamous is The Happy Merchant, an over-the-top depiction of a greedy Jewish person. Up until this video, I thought that this caricature came from Nazi Germany in the 1940s. At some point in 2009, these drawings began circulating on 4chan, where they quickly gained a cult following. The Happy Merchant spawned endless modifications, to this day used as shorthand for anti-Semitic stereotypes. A. Wyatt Mann's renewed popularity was directly linked to Garrison, with Anons using the former to change the meaning of the latter's work. This only began after the March of Tyranny went viral. Ben was made aware of the edits in April of 2011, writing a post on his blogspot titled "Swasticked Off." It was important for him to clarify, as most of these edits kept his signature intact, making it seem like he was responsible. Some idiot took my cartoon, changed it up, and posted it on his blog, with my signature still on it. I won't even link to his site. It had swastikas on it. My protest art is aimed at tyrannical big government and corrupt elite banks who have taken over the country. They changed my cartoon to discredit and insult my motives. I mean, honestly, what sane person considers himself a fan of Hitler? Ben was quick to emphasize his anti-fascist views, denouncing Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. He then apologized to anyone who saw the cartoon and thought he drew the anti-Semitic figure. Finally, he threatened legal action against, quote, neo-Nazis and racists that refused to remove his cartoons. Unsurprisingly, this did little to dissuade trolls, forcing him to make another post a month later. There's an entire or unknown cretin out there changing my cartoons, adding in offensive Jewish stereotypes, and then spreading them throughout the internet, while leaving my name on them. Rest assured, my target is the elite international banking system and the Federal Reserve, not Jews. Please help me report these creeps, and if you see them on blogs, demand their removal. If you know anything about 4chan, you would realize Ben's threats to get these images taken off the web would only intensify the flames. When trolls caught wind of his reaction, they started putting his signature on even more offensive material, from racist animations to, quote, pissing lolicon. It wasn't going away, and Ben was forced to put a disclaimer on his site about the anonymous cretins spoiling his good name. In June, he published Nazi Buggers, a comic drawn by his wife depicting him spraying down the Nazis with truth. In the description, he wondered if the elite bankers had put them up to this in order to discredit his work. He then points out the problem had gone worse over the summer. Little characters with no character. After all, anyone who would attack the reputation of an honest artist willing to sign his own work, while they buzz around hacking and changing the work of others, all the while cloaked in web anonymity, well, they are cowards. I believe in free speech, and I welcome them to draw their own damn cartoons and put their own names on them. But that would require some guts on their part, and like most bullies, they have none. A major point in contention was Ben's stance on the principle of free speech. His opponents argued what they were doing constituted free speech, and that he was a hypocrite for trying to stop them. Ben argued libel was not protected by the First Amendment. The more he tried to fight this defamation, the more they smeared his reputation. As the old adage goes, don't feed the trolls. But the middle-aged man had no idea who he was up against. He became a popular target on 4chan, 8chan, as well as white supremacist sites like Jewish Problem and The Daily Stormer. They transformed him into one of the most racist men in America, alongside a long list of absurdist nicknames. The most popular of these was Zyklon Ben. It was typically accompanied by edited photos of Ben wearing Nazi uniforms. Due to these attacks in 2012, the cartoonist took a year-long hiatus to focus on commercial art projects instead. He returned in 2013, sharing some of his fine art paintings which got featured at the local Art Fusion gallery, and they were really good. Alas, the trolls stuck around, with these posts giving them a new macro for racist edits. It didn't end there either. Some Anons began harassing the gallery's owners, leading him to get dropped after being represented by them for years. As mentioned earlier, Big Fork is a small, tight-knit community, rarely seeing any scandal. That made this an even bigger problem for Garrison. By late 2013, if you looked up his name, all you would find were racist cartoons attributed to him, as well as the Zyklon Ben persona. This was a major detriment to his freelancing, and before long he found himself completely unable to find work. In 2014, his page on Encyclopedia Dramatica was created, as well as the subreddit Ben Garrison. The latter was themed around a white man. It was getting out of control, and Ben consulted a lawyer in hopes of pursuing legal action. While his case was actionable, given libel wasn't protected speech, such a lawsuit would cost over $100,000. He did get help from the Online Hate Prevention Institute, who managed to get one defamatory Facebook page taken down, but it quickly went back up a few days later. These pages frequently amassed thousands of followers. I reported a total of 10 impersonation pages to Facebook in 2014. Facebook often refused to remove such pages, and my lawyer had to get involved. The Online Hate Prevention Institute published an article about his feud with 4chan in May, featuring a cartoon Ben did imagining his many Cretans. The drawing shows a fat neo-Nazi troll referred to as an enlightened loser, while Shrek cries in the background for some reason. Unsurprisingly, this only incensed the trolls further. A surprising ally from this time was Big Man Tyrone, an internet personality known for his comedic testimonials. On May 30th, he uploaded a video in defense of Garrison stating, "Enough was enough." On his monitor is a drawing Ben did out of appreciation for his support. I haven't heard of Big Man Tyrone in years, and when I went on his YouTube channel, he's still posting videos that are about the Kekistan army. Despite most of Tyrone's videos being paid, Ben claimed he did not commission the video, and this had been done entirely out of the goodness of his heart. Sadly though, Tyrone's pleas fell on deaf ears. On July 3rd, 2014, the Cartoonist wrote a lengthy blog post reflecting on the harassment that had persisted at this point for nearly half a decade. The name Ben Garrison, the artist, had been ruined. Yes, I know it sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. My father was a World War II vet who was part of a generation who fought against such fascism. I detest Nazis. Yet the new Nazis attempt to influence young minds and draw them to their cause on places such as the 4chan poll board. Let me clue you young people in. Hitler was not cool. Throughout 2014, the Daily Stormer published multiple articles framing Garrison as a skinhead militia leader. In response, the Cartoonist wrote a blog post mocking its founder, Andrew Anglin. "You are wrong, as usual. I'm not calling for an end to free speech. What I want to stop is copyright infringement and libel, two things you've demonstrated in abundance. You'd rather distort and alter my cartoons into hate. You'd rather set up satirical interviews and turn me into a cretinous Nazi like yourself. For whatever sick reason drives you to do that. You'll never hit me, little man, and it's not because I'm 6'3" and 220. At this point, he became the boomer equivalent to Chris Chan threatening the trolls to leave Julie alone. It's not that he was wrong for being angry at these people, they were racist Nazis who ruined his life, but at the same time, this did nothing but stoke the flames even further. Though Ben deleted this post fairly quickly, Anglin responded by making a fake version of the message praising himself while claiming it was from the real Garrison. The article then ridicules fake Ben's earlier post deriding the slanderous neo-Nazi trolls. Ben would retaliate by creating several drawings showing Anglin as a small angry man becoming his stock archetypal Nazi. Trolls think they are manly when they attack others. They turn into big babies when their libel is removed. After enduring another year of this back and forth, Ben decided to launch a GoFundMe in hopes of pursuing litigation. The page was created December 8th, 2014, with an initial goal of $100,000. Trolls have attacked Ben's wife, Tina, and their son. In 2014 alone, trolls have created 10 Facebook impersonation pages. Ignoring the trolls didn't work, so Ben decided to put together a legal team. A cyber investigator tracked down a few of the main ringleaders. Ben has amassed a great deal of evidence, but justice is expensive. The campaign notes that Ben had begun working on a book to clear his name. It encouraged fans to use the hashtag #BucksForBenGarrison. Sadly, this fundraiser didn't see much support. Even when the goal was lowered to $25,000, he only raised $850 over the span of 2 months. That didn't stop him from sending cease and desist notices, with the most publicized being the letter he sent to 8chan. On December 28th, the image board's Twitter account shared what they called a hilariously false DMCA. Dear moderator, I know it's all trolling for lulz, and they think it's quite a chuckle for them to claim I'm a murderous Nazi, but it has gone on for 5 years now, and it's never been funny to me. In response, 8chan's founder Frederick Brennan argued they were parodies protected by fair use, before linking to a thread for discussing the matter on his site. According to Garrison, following this, his phone number, email address, and personal accounts were published online. Now, something that might have stuck out to you about the last email is Ben's use of the word lulz. Many began to notice that over the years, the cartoonist started to pick up the language commonly used by his detractors, but few could have predicted what happened next. You see, it all began on April 28th in the midst of the 2015 Baltimore protests. That day, poll users stumbled upon a Fox News affiliate's live coverage of the riots. The anchors were reading cloud comments from chats, enabling trolls to mess with them. This entailed messages referencing Bane posting, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, and of course, the internet's most virulent racist, Ben Garrison.
I'm watching the stream and horrified, praying for the people of Baltimore. Hopefully we can get this Ben Garrison on scene to fix this.
He's a cartoonist?
Yeah, I guess people are just like referencing him or something.
And I see some of the swastika. I don't know.
Internet trolls have been
anti-Semitic
attacking.
political cartoonist. Oh, he's an anti-Semitic political cartoonist. Why are we talking about this?
I don't know, because people keep bringing him up.
Okay, well,
disregard any comments by this. Has nothing to do with.
And a guy who does that kind of stuff.
Later that day, a thread was created on 8chan's poll to discuss the incident. Though most celebrated the trolling, one anon in particular seemed quite upset over what they had done. Go f*** yourselves with a cactus, you unfunny f***s. Do you guys think you're funny or some? In that case, well memed. Go ahead and pat yourself on the back for your astonishing achievement. I get that Ben Garrison is a piece of for threatening our Lord and Savior Hot Wheels, but you guys are taking it too far, and the level of posting in our other threads with unfunny Ben Garrison jokes is out of control. If you haven't successfully heroed yourself, you should consider doing it now. Go f*** yourselves. The specific phrase, go f*** yourself with a cactus, led one user to reply asking if he was Ben Garrison. In response, the anon remarked, "Anyone who defends Ben gets called Ben. A way of silencing free speech. Nice job, anons." Someone replied once more, "But what if you are Ben, bruh?" That's when the anon decided the jig was up, posting an original illustration of Frederick Brennan burning alive. Maybe I am. After all, here's an image I drew of your hero, burning in his own personal hell. Upon realizing there were no other instances of this picture on the web, it became apparent they were talking to the real 58-year-old. For clarity, Brennan was born with brittle bone disease and is wheelchair-bound. This led him to receive the nickname Hot Wheels. Ben clarified his drawing wasn't meant to be mean, viewing Frederick as suffering a huge inequity in life and living in a virtual hell. If reincarnation exists, I think in his next life he'll come back as a handsome 6'5" behemoth with beautiful women hanging on his arms. At the same time, Ben hated 4chan's founder Moot, real name Christopher Poole. Moot is an utter scoundrel. I don't like Moot's site, and in fact, the bastard banned me. For the first time, Garrison and the trolls were speaking to each other directly. The artist showed he could keep up with their antics, leading the thread to be surprisingly respectful. He would write positively about the experience on his blog. I engaged in a wee bit of fun conversation and banter with the folks on 8chan poll tonight. It was actually fun. Some of the kids there were smart and had some kind things to say. I'm encouraged. Brennan thanked Garrison for his drawing, and the two had a friendly interaction on Twitter. Ben would go on to sell merch of the cartoon with a cut of the proceeds going to Brennan. That May, he would publish the book intended to clear his name, Rogue Cartoonist, The Internet Perils of a Citizen Muckraker. The book serves as both an autobiography, an explanation of his views at length, as well as a documented recount of the harassments he faced online. I uploaded a few personal photos, included a photo of me on the beach in Washington. It had been my 50th birthday and I had come across a rock shaped like a nose. I put it up to my face. Everyone thought it was funny. This photo would later be used against me to prove I was anti-Semitic. A fun, carefree moment in my life had been turned into hate. Much of the book focuses on explaining memes and how Chan culture operates from the perspective of a boomer. He elaborates on his hatred of 4chan's founder, arguing that the site's response to Gamergate proved a double standard. Pool's moderators put an end to the trolling. This shows Pool is quite capable of removing libel and copyright infringement, but in my case, he refused. He made similar points against Facebook, under the belief that many platforms look the other way on purpose. It's my theory that Facebook wants this sort of edginess. Young people are their future source of income, and if the kids like racist and anti-Semitic A. White man drawings, then so be it. Perhaps the most fascinating section of the book concerns the specific trolls he dealt with over the years. They range from Andrew Anglin to Reddit lowlives with names like European88, 6 million more, and Buttnut. As mentioned earlier, during the summer of 2014, Garrison hired a private detective to identify some of these trolls. The investigator was able to produce names, addresses, and many other personal attributes. Buttnut, for instance, was a far lefty in his mid-30s. He was one of the individuals that involved Garrison's wife and son. In retaliation, Tina began making memes referencing his real identity to be spread on Poll, dubbing him the Mango Mangler for his love of the fruit. Irony aside, it was effective, as the images continued circulating even after they stopped engaging directly. Still, after the book was published, trolls were able to cause problems for Garrison. That summer, he was once again dropped by a local gallery after a flood of emails claimed he was a Nazi mass murderer. I tried to explain, but she was so rattled I had to leave. And that cost me. That's what they're after. To destroy your peace of mind and means of making a living. But a few months later, he would score a rare, massive win. On September 10th, Oz Witness, one of the biggest trolls, went silent. That's because the individual behind the account, Joshua Goldberg, was arrested for providing bomb-making instructions to an FBI agent posing online as a Muslim extremist. When arrested, Goldberg was 20 years old and living with his parents in Florida. This was a massive turning point, as not only was his biggest detractor now behind bars, but he would harness the years of dealing with online political culture through these trolls and apply it to political cartoons for the culture war that began to brew in the mid-2010s. That November, Garrison created a cartoon called Attack of the Crybullies, depicting college students as giant babies in their safe space. It was his first recognition of what became known as social justice warriors. A few years ago, when I first heard the term social justice warrior, I wasn't sure what it meant. I thought SJWs were doing some kind of noble, laudable work. I pictured them trying to help the downtrodden in society. Instead, SJWs epitomize political correctness gone amok. The post was mass reported by offended parties, resulting in a 24-hour ban. The story of his suspension went viral on Twitter, adding evidence to the right's belief that Facebook was censoring conservatives. This would be his first break into wider conservative spaces on his own terms, and the start of what would be his golden age. For those unaware, it was around this time Garrison became an ardent supporter of presidential candidate Donald Trump. While they disagreed on many issues, Trump claimed he was willing to audit the Federal Reserve, which won him over. He's worth supporting, especially since he's not afraid to be politically incorrect. That's a huge breath of fresh air. He related to Trump when people began calling him a racist or Nazi. Usually when someone starts calling you a racist, that's designed to shut down free speech. That means they don't have an argument, so they want to shut him down by calling him names. Before long, his artwork became a mix of pro-Trump and anti-SJW illustrations. A perfect mix to go viral amongst the growing online right. In late 2015, Garrison created an account on Patreon. By mid-2016, he was earning over $1,000 a month from his more than 120 supporters. 2016 is the first year where there are comic entries for every single month, a discipline he's maintained ever since. Tina became his full-time social media manager, helping grow his Twitter account to 80,000 followers. Garrison's comics would end up being controversial for their own reasons. His drawings of Trump, for example, usually depict him as hyper-masculine and physically in shape. These were sold on his website as t-shirts and mugs, becoming big sellers. Generally, his views didn't veer too far from the conservative status quo. In May 2016, a cartoon he made comparing Michelle Obama to Melania Trump drew national attention, reading, "Make the First Lady Great Again." Several outlets criticized him for the perceived subtext that African American women were more masculine than white women. It's hard to argue against this assessment given the strategically placed crotch bulge. In June, he made a cartoon about the Brexit referendum called Abandoned Ship. The cartoon depicts the EU being taken over by globalists and Muslims. It was reposted by the political campaign group Leave.eu, which drew criticism from Andrew Brown of The Guardian. These tropes are not just racist. They are callbacks to the particular style of nationalist anti-Semitism that we thought had been purged from Europe forever in 1945. The figures in those cartoons are drawn from the same stock as those that populated Nazi papers. Ben responded by arguing it represented the influx of people who do not want to assimilate into Western culture. By then, his work had been shared by figures like Ann Coulter, Julian Assange, and Kylie Jenner. Jenner retweeted his Citizen Cattle cartoon, which called out GMO foods and Big Pharma. His comics regularly appeared on InfoWars, with him even being brought on for an interview that August. Some right-wing figures began to patronize him personally, such as white nationalist Stephen Molyneux. Another frequent patron was Mike Cernovich, an early proponent of the alt-right. Cernovich enjoyed his work so much he paid Ben above-market rates for commissions and promoted him heavily. He's a great-hearted person who deserves to succeed. His work is both family-friendly and politically audacious. That's a hard style to pull off. By 2017, Garrison was internationally known, with many of his works being translated to several languages. Wired called him the alt-right's favorite cartoonist, and right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos praised him as, quote, the most trolled man in history. At the same time, this fame led to different forms of scrutiny. In August of 2017, the Anti-Defamation League published an article denouncing a cartoon he made for Mike Cernovich. The comic shows both the director of the CIA and the National Security Advisor as puppets of George Soros, who himself is a puppet of the Rothschilds. The ADL argues this depicted a Jewish conspiracy, since both Soros and the Rothschilds were Jewish. It's worth noting Ben had broached this subject before in his book. I've received a lot of criticism because I don't blame the Jews. I'm well aware that many behind the fraud of central banking happen to be Jews, including the Rothschilds family. I do not attack anyone based on race or religion. The vast majority of Jews are not bankers. Jewish people have made an immeasurable contribution to mankind through the arts and sciences. I know I'll catch a lot of flack for this, but bring it on. Israel does have a powerful lobby in the US, but if we're going to send money to other countries, doesn't Israel also deserve it? In response to the ADL specifically, Ben would state that he was being smeared as anti-Semitic. Cernovich would back down, cropping the cartoon to remove the controlling hand. Out of all the comics he made during this period, the ones that aged the worst were usually his attempts to praise other right-wing figures. Even his Donald Trump comics started to raise eyebrows as he continued depicting him as a handsome beefcake mooning the camera. His art style didn't land with everyone, and many of the odd caricatures and scenarios he'd draw became memes. Show me your war face! Now drop and give me 20 pronouns! One notable example is a drawing that bizarrely resembles a furry vorophilia fantasy. A popular subset of parodies were Ben Garrison cum comics, which swapped out the political allegories to make his comics about semen. This is an important piece of context as online political cartoonists began to rise in prominence in the late 2010s, with many like Stone Toss becoming popular macros and memes as well. While Ben came to terms with those previous 5 years of trolling, it would still cause him problems from time to time. In July of 2018, Ron Paul would end up sharing one of Garrison's cartoons in a post decrying cultural Marxism. The only problem is that it was fake, using racist caricatures from A. Wyatt Mann. It was swiftly deleted, but this did little to quell the backlash. Paul later clarified he did not tweet the image out personally, attributing it to an unspecified staff member. Still, it was a pretty big blunder given the blatant use of racist propaganda. That October, Ben faced some criticism for his cartoon, Our Democracy. Many critics pointed out its resemblance to The Happy Merchant, which, if not intentional, is something you would think he'd be more careful about given the Zyklon Ben period of his life. 2019 began with another hoax, this time in India when a comic featuring a cow was falsely attributed to him. By then, Ben had far more control over his online reputation, having amassed 150,000 followers on Twitter. He would become significant enough that in July of 2017, he was invited by the Trump administration to visit the White House for a social media summit. Sadly, this would be rescinded following complaints from the Anti-Defamation League over his comic from 2017. He was later disinvited 4 days later. Garrison stood by his comic, reiterating that it wasn't anti-Semitic. Now they want any criticism of George Soros to be silenced by the same means. They use the anti-Semitism insult as a tactic to silence critics. Ironically, some were reluctant to defend him, as a few weeks prior he had called out the New York Times for their own anti-Semitic cartoon. It's worth mentioning Garrison still flew out to the Capitol on his own dime. He wrote of his experience on the 15th, giving insight to how it all fell apart. A White House representative called me. They were wondering if my presence would be too much of a distraction. I didn't pick up on their cue at first. Oh no, don't worry about it. It's just a tempest in a teapot. I'm still happy to be coming. Silly me. I didn't pick up on their real intent. I was being asked to voluntarily withdraw so the president wouldn't be seen as the one who kicked me out. My only proviso to them was that it all be kept silent. I would not tell anyone, and the White House wouldn't mention I wasn't going to be there either. Ben was furious when his exclusion reached the news cycle anyway, although the White House denied leaking it to the press. As a consolation, he was still able to attend the after-party though. My reputation was trampled upon mercilessly. I missed an opportunity of a lifetime of going to the White House. I was able to attend the after-party for the summit and talk to the summit attendees. Everyone supported me and felt that what happened to me was wrong. I also spoke to someone I will not name. He set everything right, and I do not blame the White House or the president for what happened. I like to envision that person was Jeffrey Epstein. One of his strangest pieces was made in January of 2020, following the death of Kobe Bryant. Ben sought to make a sincere tribute piece in his memory. What he came up with was a huge anthropomorphized basketball crying tears made up of smaller basketballs. The sheer absurdity turned it into a meme, with The Onion even parodying his drawing after the passing of American comedian Gallagher. That July, Garrison attempted to sue the ADL for defamation. He argued the situation over the 2017 comic caused him embarrassment, humiliation, mental suffering, anguish, as well as injury to his name and professional reputation. He sought $10.35 million in damages. The suit was dismissed within a year, citing a lack of personal jurisdiction and improper venue or failure to state a claim. As the end of Trump's first term neared, Ben remained steadfast in his support. That continued even in light of January 6th, when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. Ben openly supported the Capitol riots, posting this cartoon the next day. "Can you hear us now?" As a result, both his Twitter and Facebook accounts were suspended. While the latter was temporary, the former was permanent. Nonetheless, Garrison persisted, creating a January 6th collection of prints. He continued producing cartoons without a hitch, as the Biden administration, alongside the pandemic and subsequent vaccine, provided plenty of material to work with. By November, Ben had published 5 different Trump-themed paperback collections. Even after losing Twitter, he was still able to make a living off of his work, a feat not many online artists could accomplish. With that said, at a certain point, it became hard to pin down an actual ideology for Mr. Garrison's work. One of the rare instances he deviated from Trump was due to his stance on COVID vaccines. That December, he depicted Trump on the big pharma bandwagon being booed by his supporters. But the person he would end up beefing with the most was fellow cartoonist and Dilberito creator Scott Adams, also known as the creator of Dilbert. Adams has been controversial in his own right in recent years as an ardent supporter of Donald Trump as well. I've actually already made a video about him if you'd like to learn more about his backstory. Adams caught Garrison's ire after he admitted to getting vaccinated against COVID, defending himself by stating he believes in science. "I didn't know any of this since I no longer follow Adams, and he blocked Gur Graphics on his Twitter feed back in 2019, but I came across a disturbing video that he posted on YouTube. He may be experiencing some injection remorse, but his pride will not let him admit it. Not completely. He begrudgingly said we anti-vax types may be right, but we were right accidentally, and we're still stupid compared to him." It's unclear exactly what video he watched, but an example of how he'd respond to the subject can be seen in this clip dated from January 11th, 2022.
"Shelley, you stupid cunt. Let me say that. You are a piece of f***ing shit. Do not tell people what they think and then insult them in public, right? You can tell me what you f***ing think, you small-minded piece of crap, but don't tell me what I think and then insult me in public when you're f***ing wrong. Because I got a feeling you're just as much of a piece of shit when you go home. I'll bet your family hates your f***ing guts behind your back.
On January 17th, Garrison published a cartoon lampooning Adams called Ilbert. It depicts Scott being hypnotized by Dr. Fauci into obeying science. Then later on, he throws a tantrum at the anti-vaxxers for being accidentally right. The final panel shows Dogbert saying, "Take the L, dummy." Adams responded to the comic on Twitter. He complimented Ben's artistic skills, but implied he'd misrepresented his actual beliefs. That attitude changed a year later when Adams publicly considered taking legal action against him. On January 2nd, 2023, he created a poll on Twitter asking how many people stopped buying Dilbert products because they thought he was pro-mask and pro-vaccination. 44.5% said they did. He then outlined the 5 elements of defamation. Though Garrison did not provide direct proof for his characterization, very few agreed with Adams' assessment that what he drew was illegal. In the following days, many rejoiced to hear the two online right-wing cartoonists were feuding, with many hoping it would snowball into a fully fledged lawsuit. This never materialized, but Garrison would poke the bear again a few months later after Adams faced backlash for his comments on black people.
The best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people.
The cartoon titled How to Win Bigly with Scott Adams shows Adams pulling a friendly Dilbert away from people of color. Beside him is the text, Race Relations 2023. Now, this may not actually be as critical of Adams as it seems. His first sentence clarifies he holds no malice towards Scott Adams, and even wishes him well at the end. He also shares some rather questionable views himself. If we had an equitable rather than equal justice system, it would be based on race and hate. White folks would be convicted more frequently simply because of their race, while black people would be freed no matter how damning the evidence against them might be. This is already happening. A great many Soros-funded prosecutors let criminals go free simply based on their appearance, not the evidence. For years, Ben rallied to get his Twitter account unbanned, especially once Elon Musk bought the site in late 2022. As time went on, he grew impatient, and upon getting his appeal denied, drew a cartoon criticizing Musk. Ben finally got his account restored in late 2023, amongst the many freed in Elon's unbanned waves. He continues to maintain an active presence to this very day, now sitting at over 200,000 followers. His Patreon was also shut down in favor of Subscribestar, an alt-tech alternative, where he currently makes about $400 a month. And for the most part, that's where the story ends. Now in his late 60s, Garrison continues to make cartoons for a small but loyal following, finding a comfortable niche where he's free to work as much or as little as he likes. And every so often, his artwork still leaves his bubble and becomes a meme across the web. In conclusion, I can't help but have a soft spot for Ben. While audience capture has caused him to become much more extreme in the past decade, I'm still left impressed how this man, who has a self-admitted lack of humor, reinvigorated the centuries-old format of political cartoons for the modern age. Not just that, but this came out of a futile fight with a group of faceless trolls during the golden age of 4chan. Mr. Garrison took a bad situation, made it worse by engaging with his detractors, yet in the end leveraged what he learned as a lolcow to adapt and make content that was in high demand in a post-Gamergate online political landscape. It just goes to show that sometimes an old dog can learn a new trick.